Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I expected a big audience, and we do have one. IRS rules, something that nobody wants to think about, I'm sure. At least I don't. I expected Mitch to actually be in disguise giving this webinar. You know, those glasses with the fake nose and mustache. But I see he's come on as the real Mitch Reitman. Although what's with this casual look, Mitch? Where's this jacket and tie? You know,
it's spring, baby.
So today's webinar is on new IRS rules, and I think that Mitch is also going to comment on the stimulus package that's being offered, or I don't think it's been enacted yet, has it?
Well, yeah, it hasn't been enacted. We've been skimming through what might be enacted. It's 880 pages. So.
Right, but well, it's not the law yet. I'm gonna give you my take on it because I just can't control myself. What a waste of whatever. It will benefit me, my firm, exactly no way at all. So I don't know what the heck it's for, or who it's going to benefit, or what it's going to do. But maybe Mitch has a better answer for you guys. As essential businesses, by the way, we're all, well, I should say you're all open. You're all working. You have your full staff, or could have your full staff. The layoffs that you have are minimal, I suspect, because you need your staff. To the extent that you do want to lay people off, I know they'll be able to apply for immediate unemployment benefits. In New York, we have family leave, which is a state benefit, so it doesn't cover the whole country, so it doesn't, most of you, it doesn't do any good. But anyway, so the IRS rules, which are somewhat complex, and as soon as we start talking about it, I sort of tune out because I don't even want to know it. But my office manager, who I probably should call and tell her to get on this webinar, it's important that you do know it, because I think at the end of the line, you're going to be able to pay some of your employees and then get a tax credit at the end of the year. And you're going to be able, and I also think that you might be able to withhold withholding tax, believe it or not. Be careful with loans. Loans are just that. You have to pay them back. So unless you get to borrow money without paying, if they won't call it a loan if you don't have to pay it back. But I'll leave that to Mitch. Mitch, I'm turning it over to you now because I've said too much already.
I've got the PowerPoint up on my screen, Ken. Can you guys see that?
Yes, it's
okay.
Up.
So a little bit of a preamble.
Mitch, wait, Mitch, before you get started, if anyone wants to participate or if you have questions, then hit me with questions and I'll let Mitch know about it. And if we have time and it's appropriate, we'll unmute you so you can talk to the crowd. Okay? So right. Mitch, now go ahead, Mitch.
And we're very much open for questions. This shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes to go through how this act affects you. And then there can be some questions and we're glad to answer them. A little bit of a preamble before we get into this. This is not the bill that's all hung up in the Senate today that everybody's fighting over. This is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act that they passed last week. And it was a vague bill that didn't have too much to it, but the president and the commissioner of the IRS and the secretary of the Treasury sat down on Monday evening and they pressed through some things to kind of clarify how they're going to handle all this. And there's been a lot of misinformation out there that you were going to be able to get a tax-free or a repayment-free loan from the SBA and all this other kind of stuff. None of that is formalized yet. The SBA does make disaster loans, but if you're counting on that to make next week's payroll, it ain't going to happen because the SBA is fairly efficient, but they're not efficient enough to make 10 million loans between now and next week. It's probably going to be a few months. So this is what the IRS has done to tide everybody over and help you respond to what's in the act. So the first thing is paid leave. The act mandates certain paid leave, and that's the legal side, but I'm going to tell you how to handle this once you find out you're liable for it. So if you have fewer than 500 employees, which is most of the people listening today, they can use the funds from this act to pay employees with paid leave. So it's either for the employee's own healthcare costs. So if your employee comes down with COVID or needs to be diagnosed for having COVID and has to take the day off to go wait in line, or they have a wife, a sister, a cousin, a child that has COVID, they can take 10 days of vacation and you can elect to pay them instead of laying them off. And if you pay them, you can get a credit from your tax deposits that you make, your tax deposits you make to the IRS to cover yourself for that. Now, for sick leave, you can get up to 80 hours of sick leave, so 2 weeks, and you won't face any payroll tax liability during that period for that sick leave. And you can get reimbursed for what you've had to pay the employee up to $511 a day, and for the health insurance costs by not having to pay into your payroll taxes. Now, of course, if your payroll tax liability is $7,000 a month and you have 5 employees that are out and it's $15,000 of pay, the IRS is saying that they're going to have a streamlined claim form that they're going to release next week, which will get you some of that money in advance to pay these employees. But it's one of those things that they're working as fast as they can. There's a lot hanging out there, and they're trying to get you the money. But the best thing you can do if the employees are still needed and you don't need to lay them off is keep them employed, give them sick leave, and use this money to pay yourself back. So like I said before, if they're unable to work because they're sick, their family member's sick, or they're waiting to get diagnosed, you can pay them the regular pay up to $511 a day and $5,110 for the 10 days. And the IRS will reimburse you for that out of money you would have normally paid for your payroll taxes. Now, if it's a situation where one of your employees, their childcare is closed and they've got to stay home and take care of their kids, or their school is closed, or they're having to stay home and can't work, that's not sick leave, but they're allowed to stay home and not work, they can get up to $200 a day, 2/3 of their pay, up to $200 a day with $2,000 total, and whatever their health insurance coverage is, and that'll be reimbursed by not having to pay into the payroll tax system. So this credit, you could get a credit for this against your taxes also, and if you can't take it out of your payroll taxes, and you can get the credit against your income tax next year. What I would suggest is use the payroll tax alternative and take it that way, and not when you file your return next year, get a credit. They haven't talked about how they're going to do it or what they're going to do, but these are all ways to get money into the hands of businesses, because what they've recognized is if you have to start laying people off and furloughing people, and they go down to the unemployment office, one, they're not going to get much money, and two, it's just overloading these unemployment offices all over the country, and they're not going to get their claims processed, and they could be out without getting any money for 3 or 4 weeks easily. So if you can, and if you have the resources to do it, the best thing is to let them take time away to handle this stuff and continue to pay them. Now, people have asked me, how about if you just have to furlough people because you have no business? This isn't going to compensate you for furloughing people. There will probably be some stuff in the bill that eventually gets passed today or tomorrow that will do that. This is only for employees that are sick, employees that are having to care for somebody, or employees who have to deal with childcare issues. I'm going to stop here, Tim, for about 10 seconds and see if anybody has any questions to this point.
Yeah, one is verify that this is just for employees that are sick or not, and not employees that just don't want to work, or employees that have been laid off because there isn't enough work. That's
correct. And that's something you should be very clear on. And it's going to be very hard to enforce this, but as the IRS usually does, they're going to get taken advantage of, and they're going to have some people that do this and shouldn't have done it. And the employees weren't really sick. The employees were furloughed, or they didn't have a way to pay them. And what they typically do is they'll have thousands and thousands of cases, and they'll pick one and they'll prosecute them for tax fraud. It'll make all the newspapers, and they'll send the guy to prison for 10 years and everything else. You do not want to play Russian roulette with this thing. Don't use it if the employee's not getting it for sick leave. But I'm anticipating there's going to be some stuff that's going to come in this bill that's going to get passed. If they never get wired out, that's going to help you compensate for that. But be very careful about abusing this, because you don't want to be that 1 in 10,000 person that gets picked and selected for the criminal enforcement people to come after you.
Well, I think this is going to make it a little bit easier, because the next question, do we have to verify they are sick, or what if they're just too scared to work? Okay, they have to have a doctor's note.
Yeah.
you're going to need a doctor's note that either tells them that confirms that they're sick and they have to stay home, or that they've been exposed and they're directed to be quarantined. So a doctor's note is going to be the easiest. Obviously, if they go to the hospital, you'll get verification that way. But for the most employees, it could be just a doctor's note. Now, so keep in mind, if your employee is sick and stays home and experiences some symptoms, but not enough that requires medical attention, and by the way, luckily, that is most of the people that do get sick, they do need to get a doctor's note that directs them to stay home because they've got the coronavirus. So that's what you're going to need as the employer. That's what you're going to need to enable you to say to an employee, you have to stay home, can't work, and you're going to pay them, and then you're going to, Mitch, I guess what you said before is you're going to deduct it from the withholding taxes that you are supposed to be paying in either weekly or monthly or quarterly, right?
Not the withholding taxes, but the FICA part of those taxes you pay in, the FICA that you pay in on your behalf for the employee, which isn't a whole lot of money. And that's why they're gonna have this additional form where you can take future weeks and future months of that amount. You can't send their withholding in because that money belongs to the employees, but you can send the employer part of you can take the employer part of the FICA, the part you're responsible for, and use that to reimburse yourself. And hopefully this form will be out next week like they're saying it will. And you can get an advance against that for future months.
Now, let's give someone a sort of a quantitative feel for what that's going to be. I should know this as an employer, and you're an employer, although you're also an accountant. So what is the percentage of payroll, would you say, that comes to FICA?
It's roughly 8.65% for the employer part. So let's say the payroll is $10,000. That's going to be $865. That may or may not be enough to cover all the employees that are taking advantage of this. And if it's not, that's what that form is for, to take in advance.
All right, so you can figure that 8% of your payroll is going to be available to this. So if you only have a small percentage of your employees out, the FICA, I'm thinking about myself, obviously, the FICA might actually be enough to cover the payroll to the sick employee.
And if it's not, they're going to have this form out next week where you'll be able to take an advance against future months and future payrolls to get that money that you would have had to pay in the future, get it now to pay out to those employees.
Okay, but we should also be clear, by the way, this sick time pay for the employee is limited to 80 hours?
Correct.
Right. It's limited to 80 hours of pay, and it's capped at 511.
Right.
Is it capped at 511, so they're not getting their full salary, or no, they get
511 a day. 511 a day. So $5,110 for the total for the 10 days.
Okay, that's the payroll.
Dollars, most alarm salespeople. That's $500 a day is what? That's $100,000 a year.
Yeah. Okay.
So that covers people. But one thing that Ken mentioned in this question that he had, and one thing he covered that is so critical here, and if you were in on our conference earlier this week, if you get audited for this stuff, the way you win audits, I've been doing this for 40 years, the way you win audits is documentation. If you've got an employee that's out, now is the time to get a note from their doctor, get a bill from the hospital, get information from somebody with a diagnosis on it. If it's their sister-in-law, who the sister-in-law was, what they did for them, get it now, get it in the file, get it especially before you pay that employee, because you don't want to be sitting 2.5 years from now across the table from an IRS agent looking at $20,000 you took for 4 employees that you paid and questioning the deductibility of that, and having to say, well, let me go back and see if I can find Dr. Jones and get a note from him. You want notes and documents now. You want it in a file where you can find it. You want telephone numbers for the doctors. You want things to be signed. You want things that will convince somebody, persuasively convince that agent sitting across the table from you that you really did use this money for somebody that was affected with the virus, because I can tell you already, this is going to get abused, and they're going to be out looking for people that took advantage of it.
I can tell you what I'm going to be instructing my accountants to do. I'm going to make them submit the note, the doctor's note with my return.
Can't
It's gonna
hurt.
be right on it.
But the way most audits start out is you'll get a letter from the IRS that says, hey, we saw this line item on your tax return. Can you explain to us what that is? And that's also an opportunity to send them loads and loads of documentation. If you're sitting across the table from the IRS agent and they ask you a question, or if they send you the letter and you can't respond and document it, you're going to get a visit, and he's going to sit across the table from you. If you can't come up with a number to the penny and a phone number, he can at least threaten to call the doctor and ask him if the patient really went to see him. You're in for a fishing expedition like you've never seen before.
I know. I'm telling my advice, my legal advice: attach the note to the return. That way, they'll see it right then and there, and they'll move on. That's my opinion.
Keep it in your file though, because the IRS is a big place. But you're right, Ken. The more information you get right now, the easier. Somebody asked the other day, they said, well, can't you just go back and reconstruct this stuff later? No. Yes, you can, but you want to have it now before you give the employee that paycheck. You wanted to turn in all this information, because if the employee's left and the employee's gone and you don't remember who the doctor was, you're going to be screwed. And if they think you've abused this and you think you've taken advantage of the IRS and they want to make your life miserable, they'll haul out the criminal guys, and you've never seen more trouble than those guys are going to cause. You don't want to be the example that makes the New York Times, Ed Jones scammed the IRS out of $20,000. He's going to prison. He's going up the river for 10 years.
All right. Here's another question. My understanding is this doesn't go into effect until April 1st, not right now. Can you verify this?
I didn't see an effective date on it, and I'm not aware of an effective date. I didn't see anything at all in the act of the bill that said anything about April 1st. I think you can start doing it now.
I agree.
If anybody sees something different, let me know.
I agree. But keep in mind, by the way, well, you're talking about the IRS rule. That's effective. That's the so-called law right now. We're not talking about the stimulus package, right?
Right. The law just said you had to pay out this the sick pay. It didn't say what's going to happen to get reimbursed, but the president and Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the IRS commissioner sat down Monday evening. They said, look, this is how we're going to handle it. And the IRS has gone on record saying this is how they're going to handle it.
Right.
I didn't see anything that said April 1st, but even if it did say April 1st, and you've got an employee that's out with COVID virus today, I'll take that case all the way to the IRS and defend you for free if they come after.
Just get a doctor's note. Here's another question. Does an employee who simply refuses to leave his house, although he admits he's not sick, eligible under this program? No. And guess what? Even if they are sick, they need a doctor's note to confirm it. They have to get a doctor's note.
Now there may be some language in this new bill that covers people you have to furlough, but I haven't seen it yet. Don't count on it yet.
Right. Here's another question. Can we get a copy of this PowerPoint? This entire webinar is recorded, and it'll be up on my website in a few hours at the latest. And if you go to Alarm Law Issues on the website, which is KirshenbaumESQ.com, or an easier way to get there, alarmcontracts.com, and you'll go to the Alarm Law Issues and you'll see the alarm webinars, and they're all there for you. You can watch all of them.
And it will be on our site too at Reitman.us.
Okay. I should have copyrighted these, Mitch. Okay. Should we get a note from the doctor that they tested positive? You need a doctor. It's not that they tested. No, it doesn't have to say that they tested positive, by the way. It needs to say that they're home by doctor's order.
Correct.
That's the main thing.
Or they slept out and waited in line all day to get tested and didn't have it. If they were, tested, that counts too.
A positive test is not required, as I understand it.
Correct.
Because some people have been exposed, and then they'll go to say to their doctor, I'm worried I'm exposed, or you'll be worried they're exposed, and you'll then direct them to stay home. But you, as the employer, can't direct them to stay home, but a doctor can direct them to stay home and then they qualify under this IRS rule.
And diagnostic time. So waiting in line to get diagnosed, even if they're not positive, sitting in the doctor's office, waiting to get seen, even if they're not positive, that counts too, but document it. If you have to get somebody to stand outside the car and take a picture of you and the guy in the hazmat suit in line so you can prove you were there, do something, document this. Don't just make something up or expect the IRS to believe that you said you waited all day.
You know, just get a doctor's report, okay? If you can't find a doctor, let us know. We will find you a doctor, okay? But almost all the laws have been relaxed, by the way, to permit doctors to examine telephonically or by video. So it shouldn't be too hard to find a doctor, okay? Here's a question. I have an employee who is not sick, but is in quarantine because a family member who is sick. Does this apply? Yes, if he gets a doctor's note that tells him to stay home and isolate himself. The non-sick employee needs a doctor's note to stay home. Here's another question. New York isolation.
I backed up to that slide that says exactly what you just said. For employees unable to work because of coronavirus quarantine or even self-quarantine or has coronavirus symptoms. So that you're absolutely right, Kim. What you just said will qualify.
Here's another. New York isolation order qualifies under Category 1 for the ESL Act. What does that mean, Mitch? What is that? What is he saying? What's the ELS Act? What is that? Was that the Emergency Stimulus Act?
I didn't say that. That sounds like a legal thing.
No, that's a question. Okay. New York isolation order. Yes, well, wait a minute. No, it does not. I do not believe that New York has ordered all non-essential personnel has to stay home and isolated, right? I do not believe that qualifies for this IRS rule of reimbursement for people that are sick because they're not quarantined because they're sick. So people that are home, I think New York is requiring that they get some pay or that they be laid off and they could get immediate unemployment. Or in New York, we have the Family Leave Act, which permits employees to take up, I think it's 10 weeks, if they are caring for a newborn or a sick family member. So they're covered for that. Okay, so that's how that works. Does this cover?
As far as being isolated and having to stay home for no other reason that the state's told you to, I think I've sent it to you. If not, it's on my website. The Homeland Security has said that alarm company, security workers, fire workers, integrators are all essential workforce, so they can come to work if they want to. So if they're just staying home because they want to stay home, this isn't going to cover them, and I don't think anything's going to cover them. They need to come into work.
Right. Here's another question. Does this cover an employee who is self-quarantining because they think they may have been exposed to someone who's sick? They need a doctor's note.
Yeah, they need a doctor's note, but look at the slide I got up there. It does specifically mention that self-quarantining is okay and is seeking a medical diagnosis. So if you're self-quarantined, that's great, but you got to go see a doctor, just like Ken said. You don't have to see him. You don't have to see him. You have to get a note. Yeah.
If you're look, if you have some disease, an immune compromised disease, and your doctor has suggested to you that you stay home, all you need to do is get it in writing, and that's it. That employee is covered. And by the way, so in New York, under the Family Leave Act, if you're home taking care of that person, then you're covered by this Family Leave Act. So here's a question. So is an employee who is at risk and self-quarantined eligible? Yes, they need to get a doctor's note. What is the name of the bill for our reference? I don't know.
The Families First Coronavirus Response Act.
Okay.
It'll be on the handouts when you go to Ken's website.
There you go. Is this in addition to their existing sick leave. In other words, if they already had 2 sick days this year, is it an additional 5 days? I think no. I
But
think,
actually, Ken, it says yes. It says that you
Oh,
have to provide this over and above any unused sick leave, and you have to allow them to use this first.
okay, there you go. From the horse's mouth. If they can't get tested for lack of tests, but assume they are based on symptoms, well, you don't even have to have symptoms. You're covered. You're covered. Okay.
But when you, what I would suggest doing is calling the doctor and saying, hey, here are my symptoms. And if they say, don't worry about coming in, we think you're okay. Say, look, I'm going to fax you over a note. Can you sign it and send it back to me? Get something in writing that you interface with somebody in the medical field that told you that it's not a bad idea to quarantine, but you don't need to come in yet.
I'm gonna unmute someone who actually is an absolute expert on this, Mitch. I'm only going to use her first name because I don't want anybody who's in attendance trying to steal her away from me. So Amy, instead of just yelling at me, you could yell at everybody. You're unmuted now.
I would like to stay muted and listen. Thank you. I'm just telling, I've already told you some of these things. You just don't listen.
Don't tell everybody that. Okay, Amy's muted again just for that. Is child care for a sick child, or can it be for a child out of school? New York is permitting for children out of school, by the way. I don't know.
And I'm popping up that slide too, Ken. It says exactly that. If the school or child care facility is closed, or the child care provider is unavailable because they've got coronavirus, you can claim up to 2/3 of the employee's pay, up to $200.
Okay, and man, these are
School closed and they send everybody home. You got to stay home and take care of your 8-year-old. That employee's eligible for $200, up to $200 a day, 2/3 of their pay. So they make $150 a day, they get $100. They make $300 a day, they get $200. They make $500 a day, they get $200.
these tough questions keep coming. I read that this takes effect on or about April 1st. If true, then prior events don't apply. I think we addressed this before. We thought that it does apply, that it's in effect now.
I didn't see an effective date, and really this is what we're seeing here is a statement by the IRS, and it didn't, the statement I read that I took this word for word off of didn't have an effective date. So I would go ahead and roll the dice and take it. If you did it just based on you took it too early and it was a legitimate claim, all they can do is ask for their money back. I'll defend you on that. I'll say, look, you call me and I'll write a letter to the IRS and say, look, this guy used my advice. We thought that it was effective immediately. He had an immediate need. He did it. We'll duke it out with the IRS for you. I don't see that being. I've never seen anything that said April 1st.
You know, I think I read somewhere that if you do make a mistake, you're not going to be hit with interest and penalties.
Okay. Well, Ken, Carol, who's my by the rules expert, is telling me that the paid sick leave and the mandate is effective 15 days after enactment. So the government mandate that says you have to do this says it's not effective until April 1st. What we're talking about is how the IRS is going to compensate you if you do this. So maybe, and that's more of a legal question, if you're not required to do it and you do it anyway, I can't tell you whether the IRS is going to reimburse you for it. So that question about April 1st may be correct because you're not required to do this until April 1st.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what?
I don't see anything in the IRS agreement, but Carol has pointed out in the actual law that it does say that.
I guess what we should be saying in this webinar is that we're not really sure, but because nobody can be sure yet, because it's not enacted yet. So that's the problem.
Well, actually, that was enacted on the 16th. This bill requiring you to provide this leave to these employees. What we're talking about today is how the IRS is going to make you whole for having to do that.
Okay.
So if you're not required to do it and you do it anyway, that's a good question. Is the IRS going to say, well, you weren't required to do it, you did it anyway, we're not going to let you take this reimbursement? Or are they going to say, you did the right thing and we're not going to come after you? That's a good question, and that's something that'll probably make it into the tax court at some point.
I'll also give you another practical answer. It's already March 26th. So
Yeah.
if you already have somebody like that, April 1st isn't far off, and you'll probably be using up those 80 hours after April 1st anyway.
Yep, that's a good answer.
That's a practical answer. Here's a question. What about a note from a mental health professional? I don't know. I'm not sure if it needs to be a physician, but it probably would have to be.
The question is, how credible is that person going to be when you're sitting across the table from an IRS agent? You make that call. If you're an IRS agent and you have a note from Dr. Phil that you called into his talk show, it's probably going to fly. If you got something from a credible person that's knowledgeable in physiology and medicine and disease, and their degree isn't in ancient English, it'll probably be okay. But you better make that call. How good is that note going to be when you're sitting across the table from that IRS agent?
I would say if you get a note, look, if you get it from a psychiatrist, he's a physician. If you get it from a psychologist, he's not. Social worker is not. Registered nurse, maybe that might fly actually. Mental health professional, that's a very broad term. I would say you better get a doctor's note.
Yeah, if you see a website that says we're selling doctor's notes for $20, stay away. The doctor may be a doctor in paleontology.
Now here's the same question over and over again by the same person who's a client of mine, I might add, does not answer if they are just scared. We're answering that for you. They have to get a doctor's note directing them to isolate and stay home. An employee who is not sick, who does not have documentation to stay home, has to work in this industry because it's an essential industry. And if they don't want to, you don't have to pay them. And you can terminate them temporarily or permanently. Have I answered it clearly now? Okay. Does this employer side of FICA, so this is employer side of FICA only? I believe that's what you said, Mitch.
Correct. Right. Now, there won't be any employee side of employee or employer side of the money you pay them. But the guidance that we got was it's only the employer side at this point. Now, they may change it and let you not pay in the employee side either, but they haven't said that yet. And that's one of those vague gray areas. So it may be 12.75%, not 6.5%, but we don't know yet.
All right. Now, here's a question. We touched on it. Does this also apply to someone who is immunocompromised and a doctor writes a note stating that they need to self-isolate as a high-risk person so they can qualify for the 10 days paid leave? My answer is yes. Mitch, what do you say?
I'll put the slide back up there, or self-quarantine. If you're going to self-quarantine because you're immunocompromised, get a note from your doctor.
Right. Now, what if you? What did we say about staying home to take care of a person? That's in that category.
Yeah, if you're taking, I want to make sure I got the right. If they have to stay home to take care of, it's typically a family member. If you're staying home to take care of somebody you met at the grocery store, they're probably ain't going to fly. But if you're having to take care of somebody, yes.
You can get your 10 days leave if you're taking care of somebody?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Does this go, oh, here we go. This doesn't go into effect until April 2nd, correct?
Well, it's 15 days from March 16th, so the first.
Yeah. We can't use the credit or withhold employer FICA until then. So that apparently is where we're headed right now. That's what we think. That's what Mitch thinks. Okay. Well, where will we be able to find the form you are discussing?
That's a good question. They said they're going to have it next week, but they haven't. They'll have it next week. And when we do, I will post it on Ken's website.
Yeah.
And my website.
Yeah, and I'm going to venture a guess right now that you're going to need to hire Mitch to fill it out, because I don't think I've seen anything from IRS that a layperson could fill out. Okay.
Now, and again, remember this what we're talking about today isn't the bill. This is the president and the IRS's response to the bill and how they're going to make you whole to comply with the bill. So the IRS is still a work in process on this. They're working a way to come up with a form to get you this, and the form is only for the advance of this FICA tax. Right now, just talk to your accountant or call us, and we'll show you how to not pay that money in. A lot of you guys are weekly depositors, so you probably have a deposit coming up next in the next week or so. We'll show you how to adjust your deposit so you're not paying that money in, and then fill out the forms later. You're not going to have a 941 for this quarter, which is the quarterly payroll return due, until April 30th, and the hope is that IRS will have everything up and running by then.
Yeah, I hope my opinion about what's going on doesn't come out too clearly in what I'm about to say, but so my way of thanking members of Congress that have stepped up and are working, to get this thing done. Please, if any of them are your customers and they aren't paying you on time, please default them, send them to me. We'll go after them, no charge, no problem. Okay? That because guess what? They're not suffering any paycheck delay. They're not suffering any health care treatment. And I would make sure they pay their alarm bill. That's all I can say. Okay, where we could find the form, we don't know. What about employees in a state under a stay-home order? Nothing. If they're not sick, they're not getting paid.
And that Homeland Security Act letter's out there. I think I sent it to Ken. We've got it on our website. We've got ESA's got on theirs. Download it off that site, give it to your employees, tell them to carry that with them. They can go anywhere, do anything, because they're essential employees.
Okay, now this is important. I don't think that that this is right. If one employee is out, you only hold FICA on that person and not everybody that's being paid. I think the answer to that is no. You can withhold based upon your aggregate FICA payment, not just that one employee. If it was that one employee, you'd never be able to make it up.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you can forego making your entire FICA deposit to cover that one employee's expenses up until you hit the 500, whatever the $511 a day is.
And or maxed out at what, 10,000? Is it?
At 5110 for that employee.
But the credit you can end up with can exceed the 10,000 if you have a big enough payroll.
The 10,000 just the 10,000 is for the 10,000 for people that are staying home for childcare. The people that are staying home because they're sick is $5,110 in the aggregate. I'm not sure and I'm saying that 10,000, the child care credit thing, that's because that may be wrong. That may be $2,000 up to 10 weeks. They can take off up to 10 weeks of child care leave and get reimbursed for that. So if you have somebody saying, I'm gonna take care of a kid that's gotten booted out of their elementary school, you got a $10,000 limit for that, $200 a day times 10,000. So for 10 weeks, they can be out.
Right. Okay. So
that's where the 10,000 is coming from. But you're correct, Ken. If you have an employee that you have to pay $4,000 to, and your employer side of your FICA is $6,000, you can only have to pay that $2,000 that's left of your FICA. You can use that entire $4,000 to pay that employee, regardless of which employees generated that FICA liability.
All right, here's another comment or question. I was under the impression that is covered all payroll tax liability. As noted on the IRS website, the Social Security credit was something Obama did. Here's the I'm not sure what he's saying. I'm not sure what he's saying. He's giving me some website to look at, which is not helpful during this webinar. I'm sorry.
Well, there are two components of actually three components withholding. The first is your half, the employer's half of the FICA. That's what the employer pays in, which is roughly about 6.65%. That is what we're talking about here. The IRS is not the second component is what the employee gets withheld out of their check and pay into FICA, pay into Social Security. That's the same amount. It's not real clear yet whether that's going to be available for that or not, since that's as long as the employee gets credit for it, they're fine. What I don't believe is going to be covered, and what is not mentioned in this, is the money you take out of the employee's check to cover their income tax liability, which is the pure withholding. That's money you're holding in trust for that employee for their income tax, and you send to the IRS, who then prepays their tax liability. I've not seen anything that says that's going to be available to pay for this.
Right. Again,
that's not a tax. That's a payment to the IRS.
Yeah. So again, April 1st, if that's true, what do we do in the meantime? I guess you pay and you don't get your deduction or your credit. Wanting to just clarify if this is retroactive for an employee that is out right now or was out weeks ago, or only for employees that take sick leave or paid family leave after April 2nd. Mitch already said you can take your chances and try and take it for the employee. Again, just get your doctor's note and see how you're going to do with that. So we've answered that one. If you include a doctor's note with the return, you could be at risk of violating personal health privacy. Wouldn't recommend that from an HR aspect. Well, you know, you could redact names or first or last name and just include it so that the IRS agent, if the return gets pulled for review, they'll see that you have doctor's notes. If you've taken a deduction, or you're trying to take a credit rather, for 4 employees, and you have 4 different notes in there with 4 different first names, I don't think you've violated HR rules. And if you have, and I don't think you will. Okay, do it that way. Just redact the information.
There's another way you could probably get around this and be able to do that is when the employee goes to see the doctor. I haven't been to a doctor in the last 10 years. It didn't make me sign a HIPAA release, and just have your employee add you and the IRS to the people they can release information to.
Yeah, there's a note here. Doctors don't want the employees to come in if it's not serious. That's true, but doctors also aren't going to care about writing a note to stay home. It's what's the technical and medical term? It's no skin off their back if they write the note. So the answer is stay home. Yeah, here, I order you to stay home. Believe me, you'll be able to find a doctor.
Yeah, get them to fax you something. They're not going to get coronavirus through your fax machine. So just get them to fax you something, you're set.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't have to be ingrained with their stationery. What if an employee...
I'll tell you one thing to make sure you have on all these things is have the doctor's telephone number, because if the IRS thinks you're playing games with them, they'll say, give me this guy's telephone number so I can call him. They're not really intending to call him, but want to see how quick you cough up that telephone number. So
get a note from the doctor. End of story. That's coming from your lawyer, not your accountant, okay?
Make sure that note has his phone number on it.
Right. It should be on a prescription pad, probably. What if an employee decides to be, oh, they don't have prescription pads anymore. That could be a problem. Some kind of office stuff, a bill, an invoice. How's that? They have plenty of those. What if an employee decides to be responsible and self-quarantine because they had contact with a positive patient? Get a doctor's note. That's the answer.
But wait, let's back up a little bit. There's no such thing as self-quarantine before you have contact. If you don't think you have the disease, you can't self-quarantine. You can stay home, but that's not technically quarantining. That's just saying, hey, I don't want to get it. Well, that isn't covered by this.
You can also have all the justification that you would need. If you don't have it documented by a doctor, it's not going to fly.
Yep.
Let the doctor make the decision.
But self-quarantining doesn't mean I don't want to go out so I don't get it. Self-quarantining means I may have it, so I'm staying away from everybody.
Yeah,
so
but
don't play games with the wording of this thing. Get a doctor's note. If the doctor says I'm not going to write you a note that says you can't go out of the house, then you're screwed. If he does, then you got something to.
The doctor's note has to say you are to stay at home and you're not to go to work. Period. That's what it has to say. And
that's good enough.
Because of the current coronavirus issue, I'm directing you to stay home. That's it. Yep. You're not wearing an ankle bracelet, okay? What about vacation leave? What about it?
This comes ahead of vacation and sick time. You got to pay them vacation leave anyway. They're not going to reimburse you for their existing sick time and vacation leave. You're going to have to pay that out anyway.
Correct. If you fire an employee, and by the way, these fancy labels going around, you're going to furlough them. You're going to, lay them off. You're going to, I don't know what else you want to call it. It's firing. Simple as that. Either they're coming into work or they're not, or they're permitted to stay home under sick leave and they're still under your employ and they're still getting paid. Otherwise, it's called firing and they qualify for unemployment. And what that's going to do when the dust settles here on your unemployment rate and premium remains to be seen. Whether or not they're going to, I haven't heard anyone suggest, of course I haven't read anything either, that suggests legislation that says, hey, carriers, we don't want you raising premiums based on a new rated experience for the customer, the insured, because of what they did during this corona crisis.
And that's mainly handled by the states, though. So the states are probably going to seek to get their money back, and you're gonna pay a higher rate in the future. But Ken, before we answer any more questions, I've got a couple things I want to cover real quickly that are unrelated to this act, and then we can hop back onto questions.
Go ahead.
You've been hearing a lot about they've exceeded deadlines for filing and paying of taxes. I want to tell you which forms are included in that, so you don't get confused. All the personal tax returns, all the versions of the 1040, they're included. So if you don't have to file your 1040 or pay your any taxes due that would have been due on April 15th, you have to pay it until July 15th. 1041, those are trust returns. Don't have to file those, pay the taxes. All the 1120s, all the corporate returns, you don't have to file those yet. Then there are two that none of you guys are going to have: the net investment tax return and the erosion payment tax return. And erosion payments is people that have more than $500 million of net income. If anybody is having trouble paying that, let me know. But those are the only forms that are covered. Any other form is not going to be covered on this. You're still going to file that form. And one thing they neglected, and if you got a C corporation, we've told you not to do that anyway, but you're going to get screwed. If you have a C corporation that has a fiscal year, and that return is going to be due in April or May or June, the IRS forgot to include that in their provisions, and you're going to have to file that return on time until they change it. Now, one other thing to remember is if you failed to make your quarterly installments during the year and you didn't have at least last year's tax paid or what you needed to have paid by December 31st, they aren't going to let you out of that. This is just for additional tax you owe when you file your returns. And it doesn't extend the time for payroll taxes and other informational returns. So if you don't pay your payroll tax and it's not subject to what we just talked about, they're going to charge a penalty for that. If you don't file the extension by July 15th, there's no such thing as a late filed extension. So if you file that extension on July 16th, your return is past due as of July 16th. If you file the return in September, which had normally been okay, but you didn't extend it, you're going to get charged penalties back to July 15th. It doesn't affect fiscal years. It doesn't address state and income tax or franchise returns. So your state returns, the states will probably release some information next week or so, but until they do, your state returns are still due. And it does one thing that a lot of people have asked me about, and they at 10 o'clock last night, they announced these new regulations. You do now have until July 15th to make an IRA or a health savings account contribution instead of April 15th. So that's the question I've been getting a lot. And it doesn't give you relief from failure to make estimated taxes. And right now, this is something I want you to consider, is it has no specific relief for self-employed people and independent contractors. So if you're out of work because you have the coronavirus, you're an independent contractor, you don't get any of these benefits. If you treat your employees as independent contractors and they're out of work for coronavirus, you can't get reimbursed because they're not your employees. The other thing that you need to make sure is if they really are an independent contractor, this is a good time to get a contract with them. And I know somebody that does excellent contracts with independent contractors, and that guy is on this phone call. Because if you don't, I'm expecting you're going to see a rash of employees filing, claiming that they're actually employees, because independent contractors aren't eligible for relief under the bill. Independent contractors have no wages, aren't eligible for many of the credits, including the child credit. Independent contractors are not eligible for sick leave, family leave, and other employee-related provisions. And you cannot take credit for payments under this act for payments that you made to them for being sick. So what you're probably going to see is people that you are treating as independent contractors and aren't, they're really your employees, filing what's called Form 8919. That's telling the IRS, I really think I was an employee. I really think I got screwed over. Here's the name of my employer. Here's a tax ID number. Here's some other people that work for me that I think are in the same boat. And the IRS is going to ask you to file this form, SS8, which is Determination of Worker Status for purposes of federal employment taxes and income tax withholding. If you treated somebody that is really your employee as an independent contractor, and that's a whole other seminar, and they file this return, you file this return, or the IRS files this return, it doesn't go your way, they're going to come looking for back withholding and back taxes, and it could be as much as 100% of what's done. And I can guarantee you there's going to be an explosion of people that are, we had a case here in Texas where a pizza delivery company was treating their pizza delivery guys as independent contractors, but asking them to cook pizzas and sweep the shop up. They hit them with $250,000 of penalties. So be very careful. And if you really think the guy's an independent contractor, call Ken, get a contract with him. Don't treat him like an employee and write him a check every week with no contract. Now, one thing that's in the pending bill that I haven't read the whole 880 pages yet, I'll read it this afternoon, is they may waive the 10% early withdrawal penalty for distributions up to $100,000 from IRA accounts and 401k accounts. So if you're really running short of cash, that's probably coming in this bill, and there's probably going to be some relief for you. So that's the end of what I wanted to cover extra. And Ken, if you want to take some more questions, we're here.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So here, actually, this is a good one. One of my clients actually emailed me instead of putting it on here. How does this apply to salary versus hourly employees?
Well, you can take their salary and break it down by 2,080 hours a year and use that for the rate.
Right. They're both entitled to 80 hours.
Yeah.
And this also the note does need to come from an MD, not a psychologist. So it has to be from it could be a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, but it cannot be from a psychologist. Okay.
You're going to show this note to one of the most skeptical people in the world, an IRS auditor. Just think it through yourself, guys.
Right. What about kids not going to school? Is that employee eligible? Yes, they can stay. Well, they can stay home, right, under the federal, or that.
Yeah.
I get confused under New York a little bit.
10 weeks. They can take up to 10 weeks out to take care of their kids. They can get up to 2/3 of their pay with a cap of $200 a day or $10,000 in the aggregate. You're mandated to pay to the people, so the IRS is going to reimburse it. You can't tell the employee you're not going to pay them.
Right. And make sure salaried employees have to be paid. If they work any part of a week, I think they have to get their full week, if I'm not mistaken.
And remember, if their kids are home from school or home from daycare, get a note from the school, get a note from the daycare, get a telephone number, put it in your file.
Here's a good one. Does a part-time employee, say working 20 hours a week, do they only get 2 weeks for a total of 40, or do they get 4 weeks for a total of 80?
I think this only covers full-time employees. Let's see what it says here. Special rule for part-time employees. Carol is showing me this right now.
Special rules, I'm not
It
sure.
says special rule, but it doesn't say what the special rules are. So sorry.
Okay, so we don't have them yet.
Yeah.
Does the Department of Labor mandatory posting for the office says it's effective April 1st? Okay, fine.
Yeah, well, we've all agreed that the bill was passed on the 16th. It says it takes effect in 15 days.
Yeah, so the Department of Labor has clarified yesterday that the rules take effect April 1st. Okay, I think we've got that one set. I have an employee who is leaving early each day to deal with homeschooling for her elementary school kids. Does this qualify for lack of child care? And if so, how do you suggest we document the lack of child care reimbursement?
Yes, it does. And get a note from the child care facility, get a note from the school, get a note from somebody besides you that's credible and you can support with the IRS agent.
What if employee uses the time to care for another person, but then gets sick themselves? Is this a one-time thing? I think there's a limit on
10 days. You get 10 days. They can care for one person for 2 days, another person for 3 days, and themselves for 7 days, and they're still okay.
What brain teasers we're getting. How about a note from a shrink that employee won't leave his house? If he's a doctor and says it's coronavirus related, he doesn't. That should be enough. Why would you? even-
IRS agents are the most skeptical people in the world because they deal all day with bullshit artists. Don't play games with these guys.
Yeah, okay. What about people being directed to shelter in place by the state? No, you need a doctor's note.
Or get that letter from the Homeland Security Agency that says you're an essential employee and the states will abide by that and you can go to work.
Right. We've had people, by the way, asking us whether they need notes for their employees to carry around that they're essential. We drafted one up, but I don't really see how that's, we haven't entered a police state yet, as far as I can tell, where people are being stopped just because they're outside the house.
In Tarrant County where we are, the police's policies are not going to stop you because you're driving around, but they stop you for speeding or something, they ask you where you're going. And if you're not going someplace that you're essential to, they're going to give you a ticket. So I wrote all my employees a letter and I attached that statement from the Homeland Security Agency that said they're essential employees. Now, fortunately, in Tarrant County, our county administrator is a CPA and he's got a firm of 300 employees. So he specially exempted accounting firms from it. But alarm companies, integration companies, and fire companies are specifically called out in that letter.
Right. Is family leave for taking care of kids home from school and no available child care available to someone who currently has family leave? Yeah, the answer is yes. This is someone in New York. Yes, we have family leave and you can get paid for taking care of children that are home. Are we able to pay employee on this more than one occasion per employee? They get 10 days total, right?
Right.
That's it, 10 days. ESL, I questioned what that meant before. That means sick leave, okay? Paycom, our payroll company, is modifying their program to keep us from paying our portion of SS for sick time under the Act. Please clarify, this is actually our reimbursement process for those we pay under the Act. Yeah, the FICA, I think Mitch made that clear.
Yeah, the employer portion of the FICA. But only if you have expenses. You can't just keep it for no reason at all. You got to have employees you're paying it out to.
How should we use the term furlough versus laid off? Furlough implies vacation, and that implies being paid. Listen, as far as I can tell, they're being fired no matter what you call it. Either they're home on sick time, either they're taking their vacation time, or they're not. Well, you've told them you fired them. You want to fire them because you want them to collect unemployment. So anything, if they're collecting unemployment, anything other than firing would be inconsistent. Our employees are listed as essential, so item 1 would not apply unless the job site closes down and there's no work. I don't know what that means. You can't.
What's item 1?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he's talking about. You can't invoke these reimbursements just because you don't have any work. That it's for people that are sick or kept home taking care of others who are sick. In order to keep employees working full time, if the officers and managers take a reduced temporary pay cut, will the stimulus package offer payback to make up reduced salaries? I wish.
Well, that's the Stimulus Act is a whole different thing and it hadn't gotten passed yet. So we don't know. I can't imagine that they're going to do that because the second people hear corporation, even if it's a lemonade stand, they freak out.
Yeah, and not only that, if you make more than $75,000 a year, you're not getting any benefits at all. What about an employee that self-quarantines without a doctor's note? Well, that you can't, he's not covered. What about employees whose child care has been canceled and can't come to work? The Act does cover that. It's up to $200 a day.
Yeah.
Ken, I'm unclear. Do I need a doctor's note? Could I make it any clearer? Yes. You need a doctor's note. You have to get a doctor's note.
A medical doctor too, not a doctor that got their degree off the internet.
Please verify of what you said. All essential business employees don't qualify for this Response Act. No, I don't know anything about that. Just because you're essential doesn't mean if you get sick, you're covered by these reimbursements. The essential part just allows you to work if you can, and if you can. That's basically what that means. Not sure if we can touch on this topic before the end of the webinar, but I'm sure most of us are specifically interested in the proposed SBA loan grant conversion aspect allowable if funds are only used for payroll and core operational expenses. Devil will be in the qualifying criteria details, but of course we can get a short summary or general opinion on the potential stimulus package moving through Congress now. Let me, before Mitch can give you from the accounting side, let me say this to you as a bankruptcy trustee and involved in debt collection. You borrow money, you're going to be expected to pay it back. If you take an SBA loan, you're going to be expected to pay it back. I'm not aware of any if they didn't expect you to pay it back, I don't see why they would call it a loan. So you better be careful about borrowing money because you're going to have to pay it back. Don't borrow it if you don't need it. And if you do borrow it, make sure that you have the expectation of paying it back. That's my legal advice. Mitch, you have
I've heard rumors about this, but they're just rumors. And don't get your information off of Facebook. Don't get your information off the internet. The SBA is a very generous lender. They make a lot of loans they never should have made, but they're a very ruthless collector. And I wouldn't count on processing the loan with any kind of speed that's going to get you any kind of assistance quickly enough to make a difference here, or that they're just going to say, well, you use this for operating expenses, maybe for payroll for people that were sick and people that were sequestered, but not for your entire payroll and not for all your operating expenses. I just don't see that happening. Now, the proof's in the pudding, and we have an 880-page bill that I'm not sure I want to read because it's going to probably completely change between the day and tomorrow. We just don't know yet. But as soon as we do know, Ken and I will throw together another seminar and we'll get out the facts on that. But one way to look is to go to the SBA website. Most of the states now have been declared disaster areas, so you can go through the application process and see what the terms say, but read it carefully and make sure you're not getting led down a path where you borrow money that you can't pay back. And the SBA is a ruthless collection agency.
Yeah, be careful that you don't confuse the criteria for taking the loan with some forgiveness of that loan. There are probably going to be two aspects. They don't want to give you the loan unless you're going to use it for specific purposes that are approved, because maybe the loan is on favorable terms. But even then, you're still expected to pay it back. Our people in Illinois have been told to stay home. Our dealer program has stated no door-to-door sales will be purchased. So what options exist for people that are not sick? Can we still pay them and gain tax credits? No, not from a federal level anyway.
Correct.
We're going to have to hurry now. No more questions. We're going to answer the ones we have, and that's it. Not sure if we can touch on this before, but most of us are, oh, we did this one already, okay. Okay, one more question you could write in because we did this one already. Are there additional state rules we should be looking for? And they want to know about California. Yes, California, if you're in California, sell all your assets and give them away, because that's everything you own. Give it away, and go down to the homeless people. They're waiting for all your assets. Okay, okay. So if an employee has a doctor's note and we've paid them for 2 weeks and they have no other vacation or sick time, do they get no pay or 2/3 pay? They get no, well, you can fire them, in which event they get no pay, and then they can collect unemployment. That's what I think is going to be the deal. I don't think that there's any benefit right now where you can offer a reduced pay and get reimbursed from anybody for that reduced pay. I'm not aware of it.
The whole idea behind this whole act and the way ours is handling it, Ken, is typically when somebody has coronavirus, they're out for 10 to 14 days. If they get through it and come back, then they can start working again and everything's hunky-dory. If they last more than 14 days, there's a pretty good chance they're not coming back. And so that's why they clamped this all at 10 days.
Is this in addition to the Paid Family Leave Act in New York? I think it is. Actually, Amy, my office manager, if she were willing to talk to us, would be able to answer that. I think it is in addition, in the sense that you can use these 2 weeks, and then you can use the Family Paid Act in Family Act in New York, and then you can go on unemployment. So there's quite a lot of relief for the workers.
Now, Ken, the first draft of the bill that I saw the other day, I haven't read the one that they produced last night, the one they're going to pass tomorrow. It did require employers to hold somebody's job open. I think if they have more than 50 employees, to hold their job open for 6 months. And they didn't get paid, but they couldn't refill it with somebody else or fire them. But that hasn't been passed yet, so we don't know what's going to happen.
Well, that would be interesting, because then that would now create, I guess, a temporary new class that cannot be discriminated against. That's right. Essentially what that would be. Can we?
That passed bill is just a threat.
Yeah. Can we pay the 1/3 in addition at our expense? I'm not sure what that means. The 1/3 in addition. You can always pay your employees at your expense. No one's stopping you from doing that.
This covers reimbursement, not how much.
Right.
The bill requires you to pay them 2/3. This, what we're talking about today, allows you to reimburse yourself for the 2/3. You can pay anything you want.
You can pay anything you want. If you're a Democrat, you can actually pay more than you want. You can pay double what your employees can get. Wednesday, the Department of Labor published a Families First Coronavirus Response Act poster that employers are required to post in their workplace. Okay, thank you for letting us know. I haven't been to my workplace, so I didn't know that. The posting can be satisfied by emailing the poster or electronically posting on site accessible by employees. It summarizes all the elements of the act. Thank you very much, Mike Bradley, for sending that. And Amy, if you're on, make sure you take care of that with our employees.
Well, and Ken, we have something that looks like what it is. I'll make sure it is. I'm sure Amy will get one for you. I suggest once Ken gets it and puts it on his website, go to his website and don't fall for all these people that are going to be sending you things that look like official government letters selling you this crap, because Ken's going to put it out there for free, right, Ken?
Yeah, I am. I don't know. Everything's for free at K&K. Let's go. Oh, and by the way, Mitch is doing 2020 tax returns this year for free too, by the way. So
all I'm saying is you'll start getting a lot of mail that looks very official.
Oh, no, Mitch is right. I get forms every day in the mail. They try to make it look as official as hell, and they want you to pay for it. IRS doesn't make you pay for these forms, and neither does the Department of Labor.
And all I'm saying is who will take care of you? Ken will take care of you. I will take care of you.
Yes.
Don't pay these guys.
Okay. We answered whether this is full or part-time. It covers both. Everyone's entitled to the same benefit. Part-time employees, we said we don't know the rule yet for them. There's a special rule for part-time, and it's not clear yet. I believe that's what you said?
Yep. Yeah. As is a fact of the government, they're saying there's a special rule, and we'll let you know.
We have less than 50 employees. So family, FMLA, that's the Family Leave Act, I think, does not apply to us. Yes, it does. The Family Leave Act in New York does apply with 50 or less employees.
But not related to this act, really. You have to use these benefits up first before family leave even kicks in.
Okay, if someone falls under the 2/3 eligibility credit category and we pay them their full wages, would the remaining 1/3 of their pay be deducted from their company provided sick time? Yeah, why not? I think
no, what they're saying is, Ken, well, that's a good question, because what they're saying is this is for somebody's having to stay home to take care of their kids. You wouldn't normally pay them sick time for that, but I guess you could. And you got no duty to compensate them over and above that 2/3. So yes, I guess you could make them take that as sick pay.
Yeah.
That's a good question, though.
Okay. Someone said I didn't answer quick enough on something. I don't know. Gene, you're giving me a hard time today. Is it a maximum of 80 hours per employee, or can this be used for multiple times? No, it's 80 hours max. That's it. There is no time frame apparently. I don't know that it has to be used 2 weeks in advance. You know, for this coronavirus issue, it would seem that that's what it is, but I don't know that it says 2
It
consecutive.
expires December 31st, 2020. So hopefully we're all through this by then, but it can't take leave next January.
Okay, this is definitely for you, Mitch, and whoever asked it left already. With respect to the IRS deduction, can the company make a dollar for dollar deduction from FICA/OSAID? And if so, does the company make this deduction on the honor system, or are there forms the employer must submit?
There will be forms. First, yes, they take that from the employer part of the FICA, and it says that they'll receive 100% reimbursement. They don't have the form out yet. I'm sure they'll have a form. No, there's never been the case of anything with the IRS where they didn't have a form. They love forms, and so there'll be a form. And when we get the form, I'll update your website and my website and put the form out there.
Okay. Is taking care of elderly parent at risk covered, whether infected or not? Well, go ahead, Mitch. You can handle that. Covered.
Let me look back. If they're infected, yes. If they're not infected, it says child care provider. I don't think that a family member is going to qualify under child care provider. So if they have to stay home to take care of a family member that's not infected, that would the family member, why would they be eligible under any kind of coronavirus relief?
Yeah, that you might be able to get something under the Family Leave Act, but in New York, but that's New York. I don't think there's anything on the federal level.
Now, if the family member has coronavirus, yes, you can take credit for that.
Right. Get a doctor's note if you have to stay home.
Yeah, but if they're not infected, if grandma's just not able to move around, it's the same as it was before. You only got the remedies you had before.
Well, you could probably get a note from your doctor saying that you need to stay home. You can't go out because of the potential of infecting someone else, and so maybe you'll be able to get your doctor's note that way.
That sounds like a good solution.
Someone's pointing out that Intuit should be making updates for the system for some of these things. Are all integrators an essential business in the state? Are all integrators essential? They clarified that construction was not essential for residential. We are still covering all our employees and their health care premiums. If we end up doing security fire surveillance only and not our other integrators, are we covered? Listen, the alarm industry has been deemed essential, and your employees that are working in the alarm area are essential. So this fellow said not doing TV remote cabling projects, some home automation. Yes, of course, those things are not essential. And in case you haven't found out yet, most homeowners are not going to let you in to do that work. Okay. Most homeowners are acting responsibly, and they're not letting employees come in. So even if you want to do it, they're not going to allow them in. What if the business owner is sick? Are there any credits for them? I think you can qualify even if you're the business owner.
Well, they're saying that's yet to come. That's coming up. So we'll see.
Okay, so employee is SQ with someone who has immunodeficiency. The note from the doctor must list both. A, staying home with B. No, I don't think I think a note needs to be addressed to the employee. The employee is being directed to stay home for some reason by the doctor.
The key word is self-quarantining, and if you get a note from a doctor that says you have any kind of issue that keeps you from going out in public, get that note, and that should qualify you. If you're just staying home because you want to watch I Love Lucy all day, it ain't going to cover you.
What if you use payroll provide? ADP, for example, will they handle all the paperwork? I don't know, probably.
Oh, your ADP salesman.
Yeah, complete coverage. Employers receive 100% reimbursement for paid leave pursuant to the act. Well, that sounds like a statement, not a, okay, I'm okay with that if that's the case. Does deduction include Medicare payment?
Yeah, it's the employer side of the FICA and the Medicare.
So we're not, so you won't be paying into the Medicare?
Well, the employer won't be. They'll be able they'll be relieved their responsibility for paying into Social Security, which is FICA, and Medicare.
Okay,
Together it's about, what, 13.75, Carol?
Mhm.
Something like, 6.75, something like that. I think Medicare is 1.1 and FICA is 6 point something, whatever that comes up to. You don't have to pay that part.
okay. The form for New York State request for COVID-19 quarantine is already out. It's form SCOVID 19. Okay, SCOVID 19, and that's the New York form for the quarantine.
As we've mentioned, the states are going to do their own thing, so be very, very aware of what your state is telling you, because that's a whole different ballgame.
All right, am I understanding correctly that if an employee qualifies for sick leave payment or child care payment, the employer can pay up to 2/3 of their lost wages up to the max allowed. Then the employer can deduct it now from our FICA payment. If the amounts paid exceed the FICA deposit, then we will get a tax credit on our 2020 corporate return. Well, I think you could keep taking the deduction. It's because it's a credit. So if you don't eat it up, you can, I guess you pick it up at the end of the year on your return. Is that how it works, Mitch? But
This says you can take it against your FICA tax liability. There's some talk that the new bill that they're about to pass will let you take it out of your 2020 tax liability too, but that is not into law yet and not part of the agreement that President Trump made with the IRS Monday night. But this is going to get it to you a lot faster, and it should cover you.
Oh, well, here's the next comment, which shows that we're all getting punch drunk already. Mitch and his nice assistant seem to be closer than 6 feet. It's just a camera. If an employee who needs to stay home to care for a child whose school is closed, but that employee is able to telework but refuses to do so, does the employee qualify for the expanded FMLA leave? Well, that employee also qualifies for being fired. So you might want to look into that.
But if they have the coronavirus and you're making it a telework, I think you're getting some trouble here.
Right. Not only that, since I know people that have had the virus, they're not really too keen on working while they have it.
Yeah,
I heard.
Take that one up in court with your unemployment board or the employment lawyers or anybody else.
I heard HIPAA was suspended, according to the president, to allow telecommunication healthcare. Well, first of all, that's beyond this webinar. You can check in with my daughter, who heads the K&K healthcare department, and she's giving loads of webinars. You go on our website, by the way, you can hear the healthcare webinars that are being directed to the doctors, because, and this may surprise you, the doctors have just as many questions as you guys do, the alarm guys. So the healthcare department has been running webinars just like we have. We have experience form letters urgent care officers are giving out to anyone. Right, letters. So the doctors are readily telling people, if you want to stay home, stay home. Can we as an S Corp apply for a grant to keep our company going and pay our overhead and our employees? Hey, go borrow money, get ready to pay it back. So we better be careful.
If there is anything that addresses that, it'll be in the bill that still hasn't made its way out of Congress yet. So call your Congress.
S Corps can borrow money, C Corps can borrow money, LLCs can borrow money, proprietors, you can all borrow, and you all have to pay it back. Are we going to have to pay back? Oh, are we going to have to pay these tax credits back next year? No, I don't think so.
The tax credits are not going to have to be repaid. But if you think you're going to borrow money from the SBA and I have to personally guarantee it because you have a corporation, that ain't going to fly either. You're going to be personally guaranteeing this. So don't think you can bankrupt your corporation and walk on that SBA lot.
I can tell you right now, SBA will look to every asset you have and will demand that it be collateralized.
And your friend's asset.
How about 2020 estimated taxes? Are they delayed? The answer is yes.
No, 2020 estimated taxes are not delayed. It's only the forms that I showed you before.
I thought the payment of the 2020 can be delayed.
2019.
Oh, 2019, okay.
The first.
Are you
I don't
sure
think-
Are you
I don't
sure
think
there's no delay to the 20, for the 2020 estimated tax coming up?
Carol, who's not my assistant, she's actually my tax manager. She's a former partner at one of the large CPA firms here, is telling me that even though it's on the list, that your first quarter estimated payment has been delayed until July 15th. So that is correct.
Okay, so you can delay it, right.
That's
In
why
your,
Carol's
but you gotta pay it. In your opinion, if we are working and an employee contracts the virus while working, could it be covered by workers' comp? That's a great question. I think the answer is going to be yes. I think that an employee is going to be able to make a workers' comp claim. But you know what? I'm just shooting off the hip. I really don't know whether they will or not. A workers' comp claim is a claim where someone is injured on the job. I've never heard of a case, although I don't specialize in it, of a workers' comp claim because somebody got the flu, someone got a cold. They have to have broken something or injured themselves in some way. So I don't know how this is gonna fly, but workers' comp isn't gonna help you anyway. There's plenty of other benefits that are available here other than workers' comp. Now, I'll tell you where this could come to be workers' comp claim. Some people are going to have permanent health issues as a result of this coronavirus. They may, in fact, have workers' comp claims if they can establish that this is where they got it, and that's going to be the key. That's going to be the key. Listen, central station operators, maybe their testimony will be, I stayed home, I live alone. The only place I went was from my car into the central station, into my working area. My neighbor got sick there, and I want to collect workers' comp.
And I will bet you that 2 years from now, you'll be watching late night TV and there'll be a law firm advertising that if you got coronavirus from the workplace, or you think you did, or you may have gotten it, call this 800 number and we'll sue the hell out of somebody for you.
Yeah. Is there an ending date if it goes beyond 12/31? Does it reset? I don't know the answer.
But when typically the IRS says 12/31, they mean, well, think about it.
And someone's asking about a family leave. Child is out of school. Is there no pay for the first 10 days? Is that correct?
No.
Again, they're referring to New York now, right? That's
Well,
not the.
Remember, this gets ahead of all these state programs, everything else. You have to use this first before you rely on anything else, Family Leave Act or anything else. You have to do this first before you go to sick pay, anything else. So yes, they would, from April 1st on, you're going to have to do this, and the employees are going to get it, whether they're eligible for Family Home Leave Act or state mandates or anything else. You've got to do this.
Here's a good question. If an employee is staying home for child out of school and does work a couple of hours from home, can they still apply for the $200 per day? I'm not sure if someone is supposed to be working and getting paid and still collecting. Does the rule say anything about that, Mitch?
Well, it does say if they're unable to work. If they're working part-time, they're able to work. So
Right.
I would say probably not. But you know, I can't tell you to not pay your employees.
I think it has to be no work, not working, and then they qualify for benefits.
Yeah.
California already has a FMLA in place. Of course they do. Is this in addition to the state FMLA program? yes, I think it is an addition,
It's an
although,
addition, and it takes precedence over. So if this is more generous in the state act, this is what you got to do first until you
yeah, you
exhaust.
can't, you don't, another, I think the answer is you don't collect them both at the same time, but you can piggyback them.
Right, but you can't say first you've got to use up the state, then we'll do this. This comes first, the state comes second, or unless they're both the same, then they can get, they
Right.
can't double them, but if the state doesn't cover you, you can use this, or you have to use this.
You see, Mitch, this webinar took so long that the people watching it have had time to go research and answer some of these questions.
But we have to.
About part-time, they are eligible to take the number of hours they would normally work during a 2-week period per SHRM notification. I don't know whether that's right or not. I
Yeah.
don't know.
But we're talking about what the IRS has said we're gonna do if you're affected by this act. That's all we're talking about today.
If both parents are employed, what dictates which parent can stay home under Family Leave Act? Well, the wife, of course, she dictates it. Isn't that how it works?
This is outside my scope.
Exactly. I thought the limit was 99,000 per year. You just said 75,000.
Oh, I think you're talking about that incentive payment. Ken, I haven't seen the text on that yet, so who knows?
Oh, this is on the limit. I mentioned the limit on who's entitled to claim benefits. What I saw was 75,000 for.
There are two levels. There's some limit where you get one check and some level you get another, and then you get a certain amount for each kid. But that's not what we're talking about today.
Someone's asking about whether we're essential businesses, fire and life safety. No, it's official. No, the fire and life safety is an essential business, and there's no question about it. You don't need to be questioning that.
My advice is read the letter from Homeland Security and make that's posted. I think it's on Ken's site, it's on my site, it's an ESA site, it's everywhere. Read that letter and see if you don't think you're an essential business when you read that letter.
Okay, this is important. This is important. This is important. Hank sent this in. The Senate claimed that the loans will be forgiven if you use the money for the intended purposes. I don't know that that's the law, and it certainly isn't the law yet. So you better be careful about taking loans because you might have to pay them back.
We are hopefully a day from this bill becoming law, whatever the bill is. Until it's passed, there's no guarantee of anything. They can say anything they want.
Can employees be required to use existing sick time before using coronavirus sick leave? I'm surprised that an employer would ask that question.
Well, this specifically says you have to use this first before you start dipping into their sick pay time.
Yeah, but sick pay time, they get paid. Why would an employer want to use the paid sick time before this anyway? I don't understand.
Well, and the reason for this is because the actual act that caused this said you have to use this first before you can even take any of their sick pay. So the IRS said, okay, I'm going to give you a break since you have to use this first. We'll compensate you for it. So no, you can't. You can't make them eat up their sick pay time.
Yeah, some of these questions are starting to duplicate what we've already answered. So I'm going to be. If you don't hear your question, it's because we have positively addressed it already. Second estimated payment would be due before the first. This is on filing your tax returns. I don't know.
The second one, have they said anything about the second one?
It's not due April 15th. It's going to be due June 15th.
We haven't seen any guidance on the one that's due June 15th.
Well, here's interesting. The Massachusetts governor's website said that workers' comp is on the table for COVID-19. Okay.
I've seen some stuff online. I'm not sure how credible it was that said yes, that it is for COVID-19.
Another one. Our insurance agent told us that workers' comp would not cover if an employee contracted virus on the job. Well, of course, your broker's going to tell you that because they don't want any claim to qualify. So I think the answer I gave that I don't know is probably a pretty good one, unless you're in Massachusetts. If an immunocompromised person is not initiating family leave due to the act, can we ask them to apply due to concern for their health?
Get a note from their doctor.
are we required or prevented from cover premiums for healthcare during leave? I think you are required to pay healthcare premiums unless you fired somebody.
And you can be reimbursed for their healthcare premium while this is going on too. It specifically says that in the act.
Reimbursed from where? From the credit?
From the credit.
From the
If
credit.
the employee qualifies for this and you have to pay them, you can also be reimbursed for that portion of their healthcare premiums.
Mitch, you're gonna like, and everyone else is gonna like this last comment, I'm sure. Look forward to your webinar once this passes. That's for the next one. Thank you both. Okay, Adam, thank you for writing that. Folks, we're on an hour and 33 minutes. I want to thank Mitch for his time. I want to thank all of you for your time that you were here and participating with us and asking these terrific questions. And I hope we all learned something. Without qualification or equivocation, I recommend Mitch for your tax and accounting work. I don't know any accountants that know this industry, the alarm industry, as well as he does. I suspect he must know some other industries too. And if he doesn't, I'm sure Carol does. But here we're interested in the alarm industry. That he didn't ask me to say that. But I just want to make sure that you know I recommend them all the time, and for good reason. It's one of the most it's one of the best things that I do, I think, recommending good people in this industry. I don't ask them for anything in return, and so it's not a paid endorsement, okay? Anyway, we'll have Mitch back soon, and we'll be doing more of these webinars. I want to thank all of you for attending, and Mitch, say goodbye. Carol, say goodbye, and then we're done.
See you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.